HarperCollins presents Thou, Savage Woman, Female Killers in Early Modern Britain, written and read by Blessin Adams. To my dearest husband, David Adams, for all your love and support. Thou, Savage Woman. Oh, hell, hell, hell! Woman is a place and state of unspeakable, of unsufferable horror and torment. Yet flee, flee, flee from it, or thou art undone for ever. John Quick, Hell Opened, 1676. In the autumn of 1680, Letitia Wigington of Ratcliffe, London, was a desperate woman. She had been abandoned by her husband, who was a seaman, and left to raise their 3 children on the paltry wages she earned as a seamstress. In order to ease her poverty, she took on young female apprentices whose parents paid to have their children instructed in the mysteries of her profession. In September of that year, Letitia was approached by a seaman named Holton, who offered to pay her £5 to take on his 13-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, with the promise of a further £5 to follow once he had returned from his voyage. The relevant paperwork was signed, monies paid, and Holton was thus relieved of responsibility for his daughter and free to go to sea. Perhaps he had not heard the rumours that Letitia had a reputation for being cruel with her charges, or perhaps he simply did not care. As the season gave way to winter, Letitia continued to struggle against the hardship of her economic situation. At that time, she was living in a crowded house with her own 3 children, Elizabeth, and 11-year-old Rebecca Clifford, who was also working there as an apprentice. Letitia had many mouths to feed and never enough money to get by. She eventually decided to take on a boarder, a man named John Sadler, who was a former seaman and then a runner of goods. He did not pay rent, but through his trade he daily supplied Letitia with much-needed hot victuals. Friends had reassured Letitia that John was a very civil man. However, local gossips disapproved of her living arrangement and whispered that she made a little extra money on the side by being a whore to her boarder, as well as other men. John may have eased the burden of poverty. However, his presence brought disharmony to Letitia's household. A few days after his arrival, he accused Elizabeth of stealing some of his linen, thus causing a rift between the young apprentice and her overly harsh mistress. It was then Christmas Eve, a week after John's arrival, and Elizabeth was in trouble. The exact details of her offence are unclear. She had either spoiled some work or taken some money amounting to 2 or 3 shillings. Whatever her small fault, it preceded a night of terrible retribution that was later described in court and news reports as an act of inhuman barbarity. The following account of this incident was given by John and the apprentice Rebecca. They said that Letitia had ordered John to fashion a whip, called a cat with 9 tails, which he did with such exacting care it took him about an hour to complete his task. Elizabeth was then stripped naked and tied with her wrists above her head in the manner of a seaman about to receive a naval flogging. Letitia held Elizabeth fast and rammed an apron down her throat so that the neighbours could not be alerted by the child's lamentable cries. John then proceeded to whip Elizabeth for 4 hours or more until her back was raw and the blood flowed from her in abundance, wetting the floor beneath her like rain. Not satisfied with the agonies inflicted by flogging alone, Letitia sent for salt and salted Elizabeth's wounds to render their tortures more grievous. The flogging and salting continued until Elizabeth at last fainted, away as dead. She was cut down and left to suffer for 3 days until she finally died of her wounds. In the aftermath of this brutal slaying, Letitia was immediately arrested and locked in Newgate Prison.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?